How does fascia affect lordosis, and how do we go about releasing it? That's what we're going to talk about in this tutorial, and we're going to work you through understanding what areas of the body, what muscles of the body, and then how to go about releasing it. Number one, what fascia are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the superficial front line. Now, there'll be some image on the screen somewhere, but what you'll be able to see on that image is the superficial front line, superficial meaning like top layer, and it's on the front of the body. Now, the part that we're going to be focusing on is the sort of the hip down to the knee area, because that's the most associated part of the body with regards to lordosis. There are others. You have got parts of the neck which help with the sort of the neck coming forward, which can affect, so it all sort of creates this sort of counterbalance of each other, so you can have sort of a bum out, but you've then got to have rounding of the back, and then your head sticks forward. So you've got all of these types of things that are going on within the body, but we're just going to focus on this area to begin with. But hopefully what you can see from the image is that it goes throughout the body, and then obviously the part I mentioned about the thigh and the hip. So we're talking about, and we're going to try and differentiate later on between what's called the hip flexors and the quadriceps. So how do we know there could be fascial tension within the body, and how do we know it's not the quads causing the problem? Well, the very simple reason for that is that the quads don't cross the hip. There is one muscle of the quads, which is the rectus femoris, but vastus lateralis, vastus intermedialis, and vastus medialis don't cross the hip. So when we go into a stretch like so, this is always known as a rectus femoris stretch. But what you may find is that because the rectus femoris goes right through the centre of the thigh, you may find that there's a lot of tension out here in the vastus lateralis area. But because the quads don't cross the hip, it can't be that. Or you may find a lot of tension around the knee. But again, the rectus femoris only crosses over the centre of the knee. So what we start to sort of have to understand is that there's something else going on here. And I'm going to speculate that it's something to do with with some fascial tension of the superficial front line. So what we're going to do now is talk about how we can differentiate between the quads and the hip flexors, essentially. Because if there is tension here, is it the quads or is it the fascial tension? And that's what we're going to understand in the next section. So differentiating between quads and hips is quite simple. So what we want to be able to do, number one, is we want to be able to lie on the floor. We can have one leg straight, and then what we're going to do is we're going to come and put our thigh vertical. What we then want to be able to do is bring our bum into our heels. Now, what we've done here, because we've got the hip flexed, we've taken the hip flexors out of the equation because we've put slack into them. So what we're now doing is we're just testing the vastus lateralis, intermedialis, and medialis. So when we come into this position, if we can get our bum to our heel, we know we've got good range of movement or flexibility in the quadricep muscles, or in lateralis, intermedialis, and medialis. What we then need to do is then bring rectus femoris back in, or the fascial tension of the anterior part of the hip. So what we would then do is, if we then roll over onto our front, so we've now extended the hip, but now we want to go into this position. Now, straight away, I can feel that there is tension right up through my thigh. When I was led on my back and I flex my hip, there is absolutely no tension in my thigh whatsoever. So I know my quads, from a range of movement perspective, are absolutely fine. But as soon as I go onto my front and I extend my hip, what I then get is tension up the front, but also a lot of tension up through here. So it starts to tell me that it's not my quads that are the problem, it's possibly rectus femoris, or, as I mentioned before, the superficial front line, which includes TFL, because I said it was all across the top here, so TFL, sartorius, and rectus femoris. So what we need to be able to do is understand that, and then we need to go about releasing what we need to release. So number 4, how do we go about releasing all of this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to use a foam roller and a massage stick to start with to loosen off some of the tissues. Then we're just going to give you that simple stretch, but there's a few specifics that we need to understand. So if we come down, so again, if I use my left leg as the example, now we've got TFL, rectus femoris, sartorius. Those are the 3 areas that we want to get. Now when we talk about TFL, TFL joins into IT band. So it may be, what we're not doing is we're not rolling the IT band. We want to roll the fibres of the IT band as they start to meet, so the anterior portion of the IT band, where it starts to meet vastus lateralis. So it's this sort of outside part of the quad. So we want to get there, number 1. That's the first part to get. Number 2 we want to go is rectus femoris, which is again sort of down here. When we talk about sartorius, it will come here and it will go down the inside of the thigh. So again, we want to get a bit through the inside. Now what we're not doing is we're not rolling vastus lateralis, intermedialis and medialis, because there's nothing wrong with them. What we're trying to find are TFL. Now again, we can go, if we want TFL, we can get right up into this hip here, into the TFL as well, because again, that's where I mentioned there was tension. So we would get up into there. Now this is if we've got a massage stick. If we've got a foam roller, again, it's very simple. A lot of people want to say we want to roll our IT band. We don't want to roll our IT band. We want to roll the anterior fibres as they meet the vastus lateralis, because the IT band is a very stiff, very tough band, and it doesn't really need rolling. What needs rolling is where it attaches and where it needs to slide over the quadricep muscles. So what we would do is we would come into this position, we would angle our toes in, and we would go through that sort of front side of the IT band. Yes, you may get some vastus lateralis in there. That's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with it. The roller's in that position. So it's not that you're not going to roll it. It's just that's not our focus. We would then do center, and then we would do inside of the leg for the sartorius. So we've got all those 3 different parts of the leg that we're trying to aim for, because all of those 3 muscles join on to a very similar part, the ASIS, or all very close to the ASIS, which is known as a junction box in the superficial front line. So a junction box is where a train would go in, so it would come in north to south, it would then get turned 90 degrees and it would go east to west, and then it would go off on its rail. That's how we understand and talk about fascial lines and junction boxes. So the fascial line is the train, and then the junction box is the direction that that train can go in. So TFL takes it in that direction, rectus femoris takes it in that direction, sartorius takes it in that direction. And obviously the fascia goes throughout all of that. So we need to understand all of that, roll through each of those sections. What we can then do is then talk about stretching it, which is very simple. So once we've rolled it, we've loosened off the fibres somewhat. What we would then do, hook the foot up, come into this position. Now what you can do, you can feel the stretch here, but what you can also do is just push the hip out to the side, and you'll get a little bit more on the outside of the hip. Squeeze the hip, make sure the pelvis is tilted, and we can get through rectus femoris a little bit more, and those sort of anterior fibres of the superficial front line, and holding it there. And then again, we can sort of come a little bit wider, and then we can start getting the inside as well. So just using that one stretch in those 3 different directions, we can start getting a little bit more of an effective stretch through that area of the body. But again, the area of the body that we're looking for is the superficial front line, because it includes TFL, rectus femoris and sartorius, and we can start getting all of that plus the fibres in between with the stretch and with the foam rolling and the massage stick. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, hit the like button below. If you've learned something from the tutorial, hit the thanks button below. If you want to ask a question or leave a comment, leave it in the comment section below. And if you want to watch more of these videos, please do hit the subscribe button and the bell icon, and you'll be notified when more videos are released.